Greetings, everyone. I'm trying to get myself together here for live on Instagram. Start live video. Okay, perfect. Greetings and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the broadcast. Welcome over here on Facebook and welcome over here on Instagram. I today am your host, Dr. Michelle Clay. Of course, I'm Dr. Michelle Clay, two-time Amazon best-selling author, speaker, doctor of osteopathic medicine, and certified holistic health counselor and clinical nutritionist, making me your holistic physician who specializes in the release of stress simply and naturally, especially for the burnt out business person, overwhelmed overachiever, and high performing, high strung, high stress person through my coaching programs, blogs, books, and live streams just like this one. I help you reach your healthy, happy place of harmony so that you can live your free life on purpose and with passion. It is Wednesday, so that means Wednesday's Wellness Wisdom Pearl with Dr. Michelle Clay. So today's topic is how to begin the process of detoxing toxic stress, trauma, drama. Okay, toxic stress, trauma, drama. So what inspired me to do today's broadcast is what is going on in the news now. I recently read maybe about an hour or so ago that Trump signed an executive order to stop the separation of young children and the anxiety that it causes from their parents when they cross the border, and putting them in, it looks like, detention camps is absolutely appalling. So that's what really inspired today's broadcast, because what happens with children is that when they endure stress, and I don't mean stress like, oh, I didn't do well on my test. But here's the thing. It's not really about what it is that happens. It's how you feel about it, your reaction to it, and how you process it. So let me get to the definition of toxic stress. So according to Harvard University Center for the Developing Child, toxic stress in children is strong, frequent, and or prolonged adversity such as physical, emotional, or mental abuse, or exposure to violence, or even economic hardships, sustained economic hardships within the family without adequate adult support. So what happens with toxic stress is the fight or flight response, or the stress response, is chronically activated. The problem with this is that with chronic stress leading to toxic stress, there is a cumulative effect that can affect not only present time with the trauma that children are dealing with, but it can have long-lasting effects on to adulthood, to include contributing to things like diabetes, heart disease, arthritis, even depression. Now, remember, we talked a lot about that in May because May was Mental Health Awareness Month. And this month alone, in 1 week, we saw 2 celebrities commit suicide. Now, it just makes me wonder if you would track back if they had toxic stress as children. That would be something very interesting. So how does this apply and relate to you? That's the important thing. Number one, depending on when traumatic events, thanks for joining me, depending on when traumatic events occur in childhood will depend on the long-lasting effects or short-term effects. So if it occurs when they're very, very young, then this can have effects on their brain development. okay, where they can have learning disabilities. If this occurs in later childhood, around adolescence, then they can have problems with emotional stability as well as balance when it comes to inhibition. And not just inhibition, but also with how they process information. Okay. Have you ever seen children who lack inhibition? Now, I'm not talking about real young ones, because when they're toddlers, they're going to say everything, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But I'm talking about once they get a little bit older and they have problems with impulse control and inhibition. That's what I'm talking about. Now, let's fast forward that to adults to apply to people like me and people like you that are watching. When you encounter toxic stress, it can actually amplify the aging process and affect your memory. Now, for anyone who deals with someone who is a caregiver, someone with dementia or Alzheimer's, I'm not saying that toxic stress causes that, but what I am saying is that it can contribute to problems with your memory, especially short-term or intermediate memory loss. So most importantly, I'm going to give you 5 ways to begin the process of detoxing toxic stress. Good news, right? Good news. Okay, number 1 is therapy or counseling. For people who have experienced trauma or cumulative effects of what they call ACE, adverse childhood experiences, then counseling and therapy is definitely in order. And from there, the other 4 things I'm going to give you are just auxiliary supports. All right. Number 2 is seek and develop healthy and supportive relationships. So studies have shown that children who are dealing with toxic stress, they're in situations that are traumatic, such as a high crime, a lot of violence, abuse, emotional or mental. What can help buffer some of the effects of toxic stress is actually healthy, supportive adult relationships. But guess what? That same thing occurs in adults as well, especially for women. There's something called tend and befriend. And so for women, a lot of times when we deal with chronic stress, one of our best coping mechanisms and to help mitigate the stress response is actually getting together with people, talking it through. You know, whenever something is going on, and you feel like you're about to lose your mind, what do? You call a powwow. You call your girlfriends and say, look, girl, you need to come over, or I'm coming over there, or let's meet up at happy hour and just sit and talk. So tend and befriend. Seek and develop healthy and supportive relationships. Now, there's an African proverb that says, sticks in a bundle are unbreakable. Meaning, translation, when you bond and band together, then you are much stronger than you are standing alone. So number 3 way to begin the process of detoxing toxic stress, trauma, drama is nutrition. Feed on and consume things that are good for your brain and your nervous system. One of the things that's really great to help mitigate stress is magnesium. Because what happens with magnesium is this, is that the more that you're stressed, the more that magnesium is depleted from your cells. So 3 foods that are really great sources of magnesium are broccoli, nuts and seeds, and oatmeal. Now, that's really great news, especially for people who are concerned about heart health and cholesterol, so that you get your grains and your oatmeal. But guess what? You're also helping your nervous system and helping to later on, once you get to work, mitigate that stress response. Number 4 is exercise, movement for mindset. Now, why is that important? Not only are you increasing the oxygenation for your brain, which is going to be good for your physical health, but also for your emotional health. Why is that? Studies have shown that with exercise, now I'm not saying you have to go to the gym, because personally, I don't like going to the gym. I like to get my exercise in other creative ways, especially outside. But what exercise does, even if for 5 minutes a day, it helps renew cells in your brain through a process called neurogenesis. Now, this can help later on with you processing information and memory. Remember, we talked about memory. And lastly, the fifth and final way that I will be discussing, of course, there's more ways than that, a lot more ways, is enhancing your intellectual wellness. Now, what intellectual wellness is really about is keeping your mind open to new challenges, new experiences. Now, my grandmother, who lived to 103 years old, used to tell me, Michelle, you have to keep your brain active. So she always would do puzzles, word searches. She would read. Now, her eyesight was bad because she had macular degeneration, but she was a funny sight. She never gave up. She'd have on her glasses and a huge magnifying glass to keep that brain active. You're actually enhancing your intellectual wellness, which helps the process of what I talked about earlier with neurogenesis. The production of new connections between nerve cells, which is going to help with learning, processing information, and memory. Now, that's something that's really important about processing information, because people who deal with toxic stress, especially children from trauma, then what it does is it severs your sense of self. It severs your perception of the world, and it severs and separates you from clarity on your purpose. So, one thing that you can do to help keep an open mind is to try and create new experiences. So for those of you who have never worked with me before, that would be a new experience. I often say, you have to do something you've never done in order to have something you've never had. So why don't you try? If you are dealing with the toxicity of stress, if you have already sought professional counseling and therapy, I am not a psychiatrist, a psychologist. Yes, I am a physician, but I specialize in the release of stress simply and naturally. Your stress release strategist. Then schedule some time with me. And for a complimentary 15-minute consultation, try something new. Enhance your intellectual wellness. An old African proverb says this: in the moment of crisis, the wise build bridges and the foolish build dams. So build a bridge, not to get over it, but to be wise and create something new, bridging you from where you've been to where you want to be, and how you want to be, and who you want to be. So go to www.freelifestrategy.com in order to schedule your complimentary consultation so we can begin this process. Again, that is www.freelifestrategy.com. So if you or someone you know is dealing with trauma, okay, I am not a trauma specialist. I know someone who does that. Actually, I know two people. I am not a trauma specialist. But what happens is that a lot of times trauma and chronic stress that we have dealt with as a child, like I explained earlier, it shows up in our adult life, and it affects not only our physical health, but it affects how we see the world, how we process information, and how we deal with the world. So when we see things that are traumatic, such as what is going on in the news, it can trigger some things from our past. And you can't do this alone. Remember, sticks in a bundle are unbreakable. So I would love to be a part of your bundle. So schedule time at www.freelifestrategy.com. So that is our broadcast for today on Wednesday with Wednesday's Wellness Wisdom Pearl with Dr. Michelle Clay. Thank you so much for joining me. Make sure that you share, because sharing is caring. Tag someone, share on your page, share onto their timeline if this resonates with your soul, your spirit, and you know it is time. So until next time. Hey, B-Walk. So until next time, thank you for joining me. I want you to be well. I want you to do something well and wise for yourself and have a beautiful, rejuvenating, stress-free evening. Goodbye.